Tristan, my partner, was born in what is now known as Zimbabwe, then still Rhodesia, in August of 1966. When he was young, he and his family lived on a farm in an area named Ruwa. They lived in a simple bungalow with a corrugated zinc roof. His father's name was John, a geologist originally from South Africa, born in November of 1936. His mother was named Penny, who was born in England 4 years before World War II. Tristan was the youngest child and had 3 older siblings. From a young age, he was fascinated by the writings of C.S. Lewis and later of Tolkien, having been given copies of their books by his grandmother. His other passion was horses, and as a youth, his ambition was to become a professional horseman. His favorite horse was named Butler. His second favorite was Colin. Alas, in 1984, after a long struggle with eczema, he discovered that he was allergic, not to horses, but to the polish that was used to clean the saddles and bridles. This forced him to abandon his dreams. Between 1985 and 1987, as was the law in those times, he spent time in the National Defence Force, even though he felt no sense of loyalty to the ideals he was forced to defend. The following year, Tristan began a research project on a game farm outside Pretoria, the land of which had been earmarked for the development of low-cost housing. The aim of the research was to ensure a suitable habitat for a large herd of antelope. Tragically, the whole project came to an abrupt and violent end when a group of men, armed with automatic rifles, came onto the farm and slaughtered the entire herd of blesbok in cold blood. Devastated, he felt that perhaps he had a calling to some higher purpose. He attended a Christian college at a place called Petra, situated in the South African Lowveld. Tristan had always been interested in art and had studied the subject right through until senior school. In a way, it had become a form of therapy for him. Thus, in 1990, he decided to further his studies at an art school in the middle of Johannesburg. Between 1992 and 2000 was a troubled time, a period which Tristan chooses to overlook. So in March of 2000, we finally met in Durban, having been pen pals for about 6 months before that fateful day. In the summer of that year, we went on a camping trip to the Loskop Dam in the province of Limpopo. The camping trip was significant in 2 ways. Firstly, it was when Tristan accepted paganism as his chosen faith, having become increasingly disillusioned with the Christian church. And secondly, it was when we decided to make our love for each other official. On the 29th of August 2001, we were hand-fasted. This is a pagan tradition, a mix between a marriage and an engagement. Traditionally, it is known as a betrothal. In our case, the high priest and priestess who officiated over the ceremony were 2 close friends of ours, Matthew and Alice McKinley. Having heard my partner's vows, it was my turn to offer mine. I found that I kept choking over my tears, and they took a lot longer than I had anticipated. To lighten the mood, we had decided to invent our own fun element to the proceedings. I ran as fast as I could to a large oak tree and waited for Tristan to come and capture me. We went on a short honeymoon to the Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe and stayed at the newly opened Kingdom Hotel, which had only opened in 1999, 2 years before. The honeymoon might have been short, but it was long enough for us to conceive our first child. Named after his father and his great-uncle, Edward James was born on the 18th of April 2002, 8 months, almost to the day after we were betrothed. 2 years later, on the 3rd of May 2004, our second child was welcomed. Named after the woman in the tragic love story written by Khalil Gibran, Selma Brigid was a month and a half premature, again because of a problem that occurred when I was expecting James. After having been severely ill for quite some time during the first half of 2010, it was discovered that something had happened during my first pregnancy that is extremely rare. It is called vanishing twin syndrome. This meant that, after Selma was born, I could not have any more children until the problem was solved. To try and console me, my partner took me on a journey to Petra, where he had always said there was a powerful aura that he had sensed during his time there. While it was unable to cure my condition, it did help me psychologically and, in a way, spiritually as well. Sometime in 2012, James asked his dad where our relationship began, and my partner promised that he would take him there. They went camping near the same spot where we had decided to be betrothed, at Loskop Dam, for a weekend. This was the trip that began James's love for the bush. Like his father, and especially his grandfather before that, James was fascinated with nature. In early September of 2016, we had planned to go on a camping trip to a site near Hoedsproet at the base of the northern Drakensberg Escarpment, en route to the Kruger National Park. But our plans had to be changed because I became ill a few days before we were scheduled to leave. James had an absolute blast with his dad. He had grown up to be quite the outdoors type and loved camping and hiking. Selma, on the other hand, was not so thrilled. Nonetheless, she did get some joy from spending time with her father. Four days later, they returned. I was waiting for them outside in the garden with tears running down my face, only this time they were tears of joy. I was pregnant again. On the 15th of April 2017, we at last welcomed a new child into the world, but we could not decide on a name at first. I was visited by Erling, a close friend of ours from the pagan circle we had joined. He offered to do a tarot reading for me, and the first card he drew was that of the raven. It was then decided that she would be called Raven. A year after Raven was born, Selma was invited to attend a dance studio by her dance teacher at school, who had noticed that she had a natural talent for dancing. This invitation would later prove to be life-changing. In 2023, Tristan took James, Raven and I to see the Sudwala Caves in Mpumalanga. None of us had ever seen them, except for Tristan, who had visited the caves with his dad as a child, so for him it was a bit of a tribute to his father, who passed away in 2019 after a long illness. I found the caves very beautiful, and loved all the formations that either seemed to be growing from the floor up, or hanging from the ceiling like surreal chandeliers. Some of them were given fanciful names like the Screaming Monster and the Weeping Woman. One formation was called Somkuba's Gong because it reverberated when struck. James was more interested in the archaeology and the history behind the caves. For instance, the fact that Homo habilis, the most ancient human species, sheltered in the caves about 1.8 million years ago. Raven also loved the visits to the caves at first, but was still too young to enjoy them as we did. Instead, she preferred going and seeing all the models of dinosaurs at the famous dinosaur park near them. The reason why Selma did not accompany us was because she had already left for Sweden, where she had been invited to attend a dance school in Stockholm after the head of the school had watched one of her dance videos on YouTube and had been so impressed that he offered to tutor her further. Unlike the older children, we have elected not to send Raven to a boarding school. Instead, she attends Summerhill Preparatory School, firstly because it is close to where we live, and secondly because there is no religious preference, and each child can practice whatever faith he or she chooses. James is studying archaeology at the University of Johannesburg and is contemplating moving to the United Kingdom to further his studies, as his interest in the subject would be better advanced there than in South Africa. He is also engaged to Rona, his girlfriend since they were young teens. It promises to be a long engagement, as both of them have decided to complete their studies before tying the knot. And so, after 24 years of being together, Tristan and I have been through many troubled times. In 2019, Tristan lost both of his parents, and in 2021, my guardian passed away. We have both found solace in each other and have encouraged and comforted one another when times were tough.
If you enjoy our content, please press like and subscribe as well.